Welcome everyone from the new episode of Nasıl Bir Dünya, Nasıl Bir Türkiye, our program with cooperation from Istanbul Policy Center, Stiftung Mercator Initiative. Today we will be talking about EU and Turkey relations after the Turkish elections and the growth policy of EU. My guests are Mercator IPC Senior Fellow Funda Tekin and Mercator IPC Senior Fellow Atila Eralp. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome also from my side.
Thank you. So, as I said, we will be talking about EU-Turkey relations, and it's complicated, and it will be even more complicated after the election results, as it's was in favor of the current President Erdoğan. So, I would like to start with Dr. Eralp. Dr. Eralp, please, can you give us an insight about the basics of the Turkish and the European Union relations?
Thanks for bringing us together in these difficult times in Turkey, in Europe, and also in the global system. We are in a defining moment in Europe, in European integration. There are major debates about the future of Europe because of multiple crises, pandemic, economic crisis, and at present, the war in Ukraine. And we are witnessing the disintegration of the security system, the post-Cold War security system in Europe. There are major debates on a new security architecture in Europe. And we can say that the old is dying in Europe, but the new is not yet born. And in that, when I look at this global context and the context in Europe, we should try to focus on European integration, EU and Turkey-EU relationship in this changing global environment. European integration in this changing global environment seems to be in a process of redefinition. It seems that there is a need to create a new Europe. There are major challenges facing Europe, both about economy, about democracy, and especially in terms of security relations. I would like to emphasize that the security architecture in Europe needs to be redefined, and there is a need to think security differently this time, not in the Cold War years, not like the post-Cold War context. It seems that the security relations are redefined in relation to economic issues, in relation to climate issues, in relation to energy issues, which means that the security issues are redefined and revitalized in a more comprehensive manner. I would like to underline that, And as a result, we shouldn't think that, that security is rising on the agenda, but it is not like the Cold War context. It is a totally different context. Now, when I look at these debates in Europe, that the two important dynamics of European integration, which are deepening and widening, these are the major dynamics of European integration. They are revitalized in this changing context, and there is more focus on both of these issues, deepening and widening. And when I look at these deepening and widening debates, security and defense this time is on top of the agenda. Probably different than the previous deepening and widening debates, security and foreign policy issues are rising on the agenda, but as I said, in a more comprehensive way. When I look at the deepening debate in the European context, in European integration, there is more focus on the increasing of the defense capability, defense dimension. There is more focus on increase of defense spending. There is also more focus on common policies on defense and even the creation of a rapid deployment force. And also there are discussions on the creation of a European Security Council. On foreign policy, there is more emphasis on common policies and also majority voting. In foreign policy, there is unanimity voting. Now there is more discussion on majority voting, and this is also rising on the agenda. When we look at the security, that strategic document of the EU, which is Strategic Compass, these issues on deepening are underlined in that document. When you look at NATO's strategic concept, you also see similar issues underlined in the NATO's security document. So deepening is quite important now in the area of security. When I look at the widening issue, which is the enlargement of the European Union, which has always been a very important issue within the context of European integration, the new geopolitical environment now shapes the enlargement debate. And enlargement is seen more through the prism of security this time. This was not the case in the previous enlargements, but this time the security dimension is quite critical in the enlargement debate. When you look at the candidacy of Ukraine now or Moldova, it is basically through the prism of security and in terms of the creation of the new geopolitical Europe. When you look at now the new, let's say, attitude towards the Western Balkans, you can also see the similar kind of a tendency. The security dimension is quite important. Also, the EU is interested in creating partnerships. And when you look at the emphasis on partnerships, again, there is the prism of security and to create geopolitical Europe. There is now more emphasis on this creation of a geopolitical Europe. Now, after this brief introduction on these debates about European integration, let me briefly mention Turkey-EU relationship in that context before I stop, in this first round. When I look at Turkey-EU relationship within this context, within this changing global environment and the debates in Europe, unfortunately, Turkey is not part of these discussions in Europe about security architecture. It happens quite interestingly when there is an emphasis on the geopolitical significance of Turkey. As a result of the Ukraine war, Turkey's policymakers are using the geopolitical card and emphasizing geopolitical significance of Turkey. This has some probably impact within NATO, but when I look at Europe and the European Union, it doesn't have much of an impact on European integration. Turkey is not part of these discussions. As we know, Turkey has turned inward in the last decade, especially with authoritarian policies at home and unilateral policies internationally. And as a result, the relationship with the European Union has become increasingly a functional transactional relationship, focusing on specific issues such as refugee issues. And the refugee issues have become the most dominant aspect of the functional transactional relationship. Turkey has been increasingly characterized as a partner and sometimes as a difficult partner, unpredictable partner, and even, at present as a third country within the European Union. And this happens when Turkey's geopolitical significance is rising. So there's that disconnect, I should say, and I will stop at this stage in my first round of comments.
So, thank you, Dr. Eralp. You have discussed the geopolitical importance of Turkey and the partnership relationship with the EU. So, I would like to ask the same thing to Dr. Tekin. Dr. Eralp, as I said, discussed the geopolitical importance. What would you like to say about the relationship between the Turkey and EU and the factors that determine it?
Yes, well, also thank you for my part for bringing us here together on this very highly important and relevant topic, both in terms of reflecting on the past, but also now looking into the future. And I very much agree with basically everything that Atila has said so far. And I think I'm simply going to expand a little bit on maybe also the different frameworks of the relationship, because if we have that in mind, that also helps us to contextualize, and then also making a reference to also my observation, because here I share this observation that Turkey was really not part of the debates in neither in the European Union nor in the individual member states like Germany, for example, which I found very worrisome throughout the past year. So now it's really the question of how we can actually bring Turkey back into the debate. and also back into the relationship in terms of how to kind of put that into the future context. But first of all, I think it's very important to remind ourselves, and this is really also picking up on what Atila has already said, of the basically the three different frameworks that or institutional frameworks that frame the relationship between Turkey and the European Union, because those relations are, we cannot say differently, rather complex. So Turkey is on the one hand an associate country, so it's associated to the European Union through the association agreement, the so-called Ankara Agreement of 1963. And this legal framework basically, or the main achievement of that, is the customs union between the EU and Turkey that was established in 1995. There are certain plans to actually modernize the customs union, but this procedure is politically blocked at the moment for various reasons. I mean, we can talk about the details also later on, but currently there is not much movement with regards to the association framework. Turkey is also an accession country. And as Atila already said, currently there were lots of debates on and also movements within the EU's enlargement policy. So actually we can pinpoint the year 2022 as the year of the revitalization of the EU's enlargement policy, but not with Turkey, I have to say. So, Turkey is Turkey's accession negotiations with the EU opened in October 2005, but both reform process and progress in accession negotiations started to stagnate right afterwards and have been slow ever since. So since summer 2018, negotiations have been de facto frozen based on a EU Council decision to neither open nor close any negotiation chapters for the time being. And throughout the years, there have been several attempts to revitalize the accession procedure in 2012 by a jointly agreed positive agenda, or in 2015 in relation to the so-called migration deals. But the assessment of the democratic and rule of law situation in Turkey and the conflicts in the foreign policy domain have actually put the accession process deep into the freezer. I mean, this is the picture I used. There are also other pictures that I used with regards to the current state, but there is really not much happening there. And so they have been put aside for the time being. But Turkey is also, and this is what Atila was also referring to it, Turkey is also a strategic partner. And this framework focuses on cooperation in areas of mutual interest and benefits. So this form of relation is purely transactional. One prime example is the migration deal, but also dialogues in the area of transport, climate policy, and anti-terrorism. And as Atila has pointed out, also the entire security architecture and security domain. I have to say that over the decades, EU-Turkey relations have become increasingly conflictual, which led to the state where two of those three institutional frameworks are broken or blocked. So it's on the one hand, the accession process and also the modernization of the customs union. So this is, of course, determines the relationship very much, including some question marks regarding the future prospects. Another thing, and since Atila was talking about the debate, the current debate in Turkey, I think it's also important to kind of remind ourselves on the narratives that the European Union is using for EU-Turkey relations. Atila is definitely the greater expert with regards to the narratives on EU-Turkey relations. But I just would like to point out one thing which I find highly relevant also when we discuss EU-Turkey relations, and that is that the individual EU institutions actually formulate different narratives on EU-Turkey relations. And they also then link these narratives to different institutional frameworks. So the European Parliament treats Turkey as an accession candidate and holds the country accountable for the necessary reforms and the adherence to the political accession criteria, and is very critical in view of the potential defreezing of the accession negotiations. In fact, it currently considers to call for a reflection phase on reframing EU-Turkey relations. And it is important to note that the EP does not take decisions on the future of the relationship, but it sets the tone in the debate. So it's not the one that decides, but it really kind of impacts the debate. The one that decides is the Council and the European Council, and they focus on Turkey as the strategic partner and have applied a rather geopolitical and geostrategic narrative for EU-Turkey relations. So the outcome so far has been increasing transactionalism in the relationship. And then the Commission, although having become an increasingly geopolitical actor under the current President Funda, is focusing on the technical part, assessing the progress of reforms in Turkey and in the relationship. So one can perceive this as beneficial to the relationship because each institution plays according to its attributed role, but one can also criticize this multitude of narratives for preventing the EU from defining a common Turkey policy and for playing a two-track game in terms of criticizing Turkey for its state of democracy, while at the same time aiming for a full-blown transactional relationship. So I think this is really something to keep in mind. And then if we also combine this with the fact that in the enlargement policy, there was lots of things happening during the last year. Attila already referred to it, but it was Ukraine and Moldova becoming the accession candidates, also Bosnia and Herzegovina becoming an accession candidate. Georgia and Kosovo are now also potential candidates, and accession negotiations have been opened with Albania and North Macedonia. So it's really interesting that in this whole debate on enlargement, there was no reference to Turkey whatsoever. So that was really the blank spot. And also with regards to restructuring wider Europe, and now I'm coming more to the differentiated integration aspect or differentiation aspect of European integration and how that actually links up to EU-Turkey relations. Because one attempt to also structuring wider Europe by the European Union last year, that was an initiative by the French President Macron, that is the European political community, in terms of, well, we're not yet certain of what this European political community actually is, but we can define it as an opportunity to negotiate and discuss important topics that basically unite the continent vis-a-vis the Russian aggressor. I think that is really the basic motivation behind the European political community. Turkey participated in the first summit. It did not participate in the second summit that took place last weekend, I think, but that might have also been due to the fact that Erdogan needed to present its new cabinet. So this is, one layer of the wider Europe structuring, and I always call it the variable geometries Europe. So it's basically all the different layers and that surround the European Union. And Turkey is actually a part of most of those layers. So it's in the enlargement policy, which is rather frozen at the moment, but it's also an important partner and ally within Turkey, although here also a very controversial partner and not an easy partner, we have to say. The S-400 were already a point of contention before Russia's war towards Ukraine, but now also with blocking first Finnish and Swedish, and now still the Swedish application to NATO. So this is really something where Turkey is an important ally, but is also not fully aligned with the West, also not participating in the sanctions towards Russia. But it's in NATO, then there is the Council of Europe, and then there's the OSCE. So we actually have different layers in the variable geometries of Europe where Turkey plays a part. And I think this might also be something where we can actually start when we think about the future of the relationship. And I'm happy to elaborate that in a bit.
So, as you finished, and as I said in the beginning, there was an election in Turkey, like a two-round election. In the first round, Justice and Development Party became the majority with the group, of course, with the alliance, became the majority in the parliament. And in the second round, the current President Erdogan once again won the election. So we talked about the past of the EU and Turkey relations, and maybe it's time to talk about the future of the Turkey and the EU relations. If, like it's an if scenario, if Kılıçdaroğlu won, we would have talked about a complete different scenario. But once again, Erdogan won, and would we like to expect the past policies to continue, or would like there will be any difference in the upcoming policies. We can start with Dr. Eralp if it's okay.
Thank you. Funda provided an excellent comprehensive picture of Turkey-EU relations. As you rightly pointed out, now we should probably talk about the future of the relationship, especially after the elections, historical elections in Turkey. I would say that, the elections point out to the likelihood of the continuity of transactional relationship. The transactional relationship has been the predominant form of relationship in the Turkey-EU context, and I think this will continue after the election. The question is, whether the focus will be on the refugee issues or whether it will be expanded. It could be expanded into other fields, for example, energy or, even security in an ad hoc manner, So there could be the possibility of extension or expansion of transactional relationship into other fields, but the predominant form will still remain interest-driven, functional, transactional relationship. As Funda pointed out, here the European political community, that platform could be useful in terms of bringing Turkey into some of the debates on security in Europe, but in an ad hoc manner, not in an institutional manner, but in an ad hoc manner, really. But the European political community is an intergovernmental transactional type of a community. So it will reinforce, in my opinion, the transactional type of relationship, basically. And here, let me underline that the relationship will be not EU-focused, but Euro-focused, and European political community is not EU's focus so much. It is Euro-focused. It is there are 43 European members, if I remember the number correctly. So it is mostly, it is more of a pan-European kind of a platform. So it will reinforce Turkey's European relations, but the institutional link with the EU will not be so effective, I should say. And another point that I would like to underline is that the bilateral relations with European countries will probably increase or will be predominant, I should say, rather than the relations with the EU, So there will be more, bilateral type of relations. This is again related with my comment on that, Europe will be more important than the EU from the present regime's perspective. And it seems quite, for me at least, this is less costly and less risky for both the present regime in Turkey and also for Europe. I think they both benefit from this transactional type of a relationship. Now, my second comment in this context is that for a long time, the challenge in Turkey-EU relationship was to create a rules-based type of a relationship rather than this transactional kind of an ad hoc relationship. And here the important issue is the upgrading of the customs union. Now, when I look at the future in terms of this upgrading of the customs union, and Funda I know more about that, especially from the German perspective, in my opinion, it will be difficult to engage in dialogue in the upgrading of customs union in this, in this political context, in Turkey and Europe. So, this is quite important because the main challenge in Turkey now is to improve the economic situation. And here the customs union relationship and upgrading of the customs union relationship is quite important, but there are major hurdles there, the upgrading of the customs union also depends on political conditionality, on rule of law, on those sensitive issues. And it will be very difficult, to continue or to create dialogue on these matters with important European countries and with the EU, really, on the modernization of the customs union. The second critical issue is as I said, the security dimension, and to create more institutional channels in the security dimension. Now, also on this issue, I would say that it is more difficult to create institutional kind of links and to bring Turkey into the institutional mechanisms. But, there could be more ad hoc kind of transactional relations in the security dimension. But the security dimension in time will gain more significance, and we could talk more about it. Especially, I would say that the security dimension is quite a promising field in terms of differentiated integration that Funda was talking about. It is quite critical in terms of not only in terms of internal differentiation in Europe, but also in terms of creating external differentiation, especially with countries like United Kingdom, which is out of the EU now, and also Turkey, now out of the EU really in terms of major debates. So in terms of external differentiation, the security field is quite promising, but institutionally speaking, in the political context after the election, it doesn't look so promising in the short term. I don't know about the medium term, but in the medium term and long term, this is, I would say, the security dimension is quite a promising field in terms of linking Turkey to Europe and even to the European Union. But we should also observe what happens to UK-EU relationship, for example, in the security field, and how the EU approaches this issue of external differentiation in the security field. But this is quite critical also from the European perspective, because Europe is trying to be a geopolitical actor, and it is extremely important for Europe and the EU to include countries like UK and Turkey, in that context. But without democratic turn in Turkey, these are difficult issues, both the customs union modernization and also institutional links in the security field. Finally, let me underline that, I see a certain risk, now after the elections in the future of the relationship with the EU. And this is a critical issue of suspension of the accession framework, which has been, quite important from the viewpoint of the Turkish Republic. It has been the basic strategy of Turkish Republic to be part of Europe, to be a part of European community, European Union, the goal of westernization and, etc. But now, there has been a lot of talk about suspension of the accession framework for a long time within the European Parliament, etc. But now, there could be more talk on these matters within the Commission, within the member states. So there is this risk. We should all watch out. I hope this doesn't happen. And Turkey still stays in the accession framework, although it is, as Funda pointed out, it has been in stalemate for a long time. There's not much going on, but it has been quite important for Turkey, also for the economic situation in Turkey. Now, since the economic situation is in crisis in Turkey, if there is the suspension of the accession framework, then this will also create major problems in terms of the economic situation in Turkey. So, but there is this risk, and I would like to underline that, and I don't know what Funda thinks about that, So those are my some.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Eralp pointed out the risks and his expectations about the relations after the elections. So my question will be the same for you, Dr. Tekin, your expectations after the results of the last week, and your expectations in the short term and the medium term for the relations between the EU and the Turkey. Will they be back on the track?
Thank you very much. And I think I can first link up to a couple of points that Atila said. And maybe I'm going to start with the risk and his, urgence to the EU not to suspend the accession negotiations. And although there has been, of course, lots of talk about it in the immediate aftermath after the elections. For example, Manfred Weber, one German MEP, was now demanding the suspension or even the abolition of the accession negotiations. I don't really think that it's going to happen, actually. I regard that as some sort of, election campaigning for, there is the European election next year coming up. So I think that might be rather in that context. Although we have to wait for the report from the European Parliament on Turkey. There was the first discussion in the AFET committee on the first draft of it. And there, as I said, they at least regard this accession procedure as becoming not only frozen but dysfunctional. So they are calling for a reflection procedure on how to actually maybe look for alternative forms. But so far, the fact that this process has not been suspended is simply because a suspension would actually really de facto mean an abolition of it, because you would need a unanimous decision to revitalize, to kind of reopen the accession negotiations. And the European Union has refrained from doing that throughout the past years. So my expectation would rather be, it's going to be, the frozen, keep it in the freezer, basically, So this is something, what I think they are considering. But of course, the European Parliament, as I said, being very vocal on Turkey and the situation of democracy and rule of law in Turkey, that might actually push for at least a reflection phase. But as I said, it's not the European Parliament who's going to decide on that. So it's actually going to be the member states. And I don't see it at the moment, at least, as something that they would open. Just leave it like that for the moment. With regards, and this is also what I wanted to take up, with regards to Turkey being a very important strategic partner, although we also have to realize that the EU was very hesitant throughout the past years of calling Turkey an important strategic partner. They were rather, toning that down. And that is also because I agree also on this ad hoc manner that you pointed out, Attila, but I think the risk from a European perspective there is really Turkey being also sometimes the unreliable partner in terms of switching its policies, from one day to the other, basically, in terms of, maybe for domestic reasons or, just the example, blocking Finnish and Swedish membership in NATO for, its own negotiation purposes, so because wanting to negotiate the F-16 with the US and also for domestic reasons, in order to play on the Kurdish issue as such. So I think this is something that the EU, of course, is aware of. And then it's a bit, the question of what is the foreign policy strategy of Turkey. And I think we have witnessed throughout the past months and the past year that there was rather Turkey was playing on rapprochement and, with several actors in the region and everything. So I think that this unreliability or unpredictability of Turkish foreign policy might change. But I think there is always this little rest of insecurity on how Turkey is going to play in the end. And this, of course, also relates to the fact after Russia's war of aggression, there was this expectation of this is the return of NATO and the return of Turkey within NATO, in terms of fully aligning with the West. And that simply has not happened for several reasons, which might be, very reasonable from a Turkish point of view. But of course, this is something where Turkey simply is it remains the difficult partner, I would say. But I fully agree that in terms of security issues, this is the field that is going to be important in the future. I also agree that the economic realm in terms of trade and bilateral trade and also the customs union or maybe even other forms of trade are important because, first of all, the economic dimension is the least conflictual between EU and Turkey. And you already referred to Turkey's economic situation. So there is, a need for actual reform. And there's also the need of linking Turkey more towards the West than towards other partners like Russia or China, that are in the global trading issue, basically also important actors. So if the EU steps out, other partners might step in, which might not be to the benefit of the security of Europe and the European Union. But with regards to the modernization of the customs union, you already pointed out to most of the critical issues in that relationship. But there is always what I always call the elephant in the room, and that is also, of course, the Cyprus issue. Because as long as we have no solution to the Cyprus issue, or at least something happens to the additional protocol to the Ankara agreement that basically is closing the Turkish harbors for Cypriot vessels, there is not going to be much movement, at least not to the final decision, because that is again a unanimous decision in the European Union, and Cyprus is not likely to agree to that. However, I have talked to certain officials also in Brussels and in Germany, and there the assessment was, well, if things come, really progress on that matter, we will find a political solution also for that issue. I think this is something that there is the expectation that there might be some movement on that. But I think really the Cyprus issue is something that it plays into so many different decisions with the European with EU-Turkey relations. Then I think with regards to the entire transactionalism and also the question of how to get a rules-based framework combined with the transactionalism in terms of not losing the entire rules-based also influence and framework for EU-Turkey relations. I mean, there is lots of discussion on principled transactionalism or pragmatic principled pragmatism. I think that is from the global strategy, the concept. I have not yet been able to wrap my things around how this could actually be structured in institutional terms. But for me, one way to actually start the relations and then see slowly to build that up, because for me it's really a matter of building the relationship from being some sort of the difficult partner back to a strategic partner, and then we can see on how to move on. And that is for me basically the positive political agenda that the European Council offered in December 2020. It was conditional upon a more friendly foreign policy of Turkey, and it's also reversible in terms of if Turkey would not start being more conflictual and assertive in its foreign policy. But there you have all the elements which I think are important for rebuilding the relationship, which is, of course, high-level dialogue. So let's start having the dialogues in all those important policy areas. And they have already started, in terms of climate policy, agricultural policy, anti-terrorism issues. So I think there are really is progress in terms of this high-level dialogue. And I think the climate policy is something, and migration policy is something that would definitely needs to be added to that list. You have the plan for the potential modernization of the customs union within that agenda. And then you have the people-to-people contact. Although that is always a very blurred term for me. But for me, now that the people have not voted for the Turkish Zeitenwende in terms of, sea change in Turkish politics or policies, I think it is really important also to engage with the civil society and to strengthen the civil society in terms of people-to-people contact and really kind of start to build that up from the bottom. And that, of course, then would open up and provide a foundation for also maybe in future moving the relationship to different frameworks from that. But I think this is something that I think is something that might be useful. And then one last comment. I also think that since Turkey, as I said, is part of all the different most of the layers of the variable geometries Europe, I think we should also build upon all those different layers. I fully agree that the European political community is more Euro-centric organization. But I think also if we want to have some principled transactionalism, we could also build on the Council of Europe for being more the one asking for democratic reforms in Turkey. So I think if we can combine those different layers in a comprehensive approach, that might help the relationship in the future.
So thank you so much, Dr. Tekin. We really dive deep into the the past and the future of the Turkish and the European Union relations. Would you like to add anything to these? Dr. Eralp, do you have anything to add?
Thank you. My final comments is that, as we have been discussing, there are close connections between Turkey's foreign and economic policies this time. And because of the economic situation in Turkey. As a result, Europe is still important. Europe is important in terms of economic orientation of Turkey. So in that context, we will continue this transactional relationship, definitely. And but as Funda was saying, we should work more on this transactional relationship. For a while, it has been basically on refugee issues. Now it could extend and expand. And Funda used this term, principled transactionalism, and we should see how it will evolve, and there will be many dimensions there, But the challenge still remains to turn this, functional-driven transactional relationship into a more rules-based type of a relationship, and to a more institutional base. If principled transactionalism evolves in that context into more institutional kind of relationship, it could be quite important in terms of the future of the Turkey-EU relationship.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tekin, anything to add?
Yes, I think we touched upon most of the issues, and I think so one thing that I have not yet mentioned, but I think it's also what Attila was referring in his final remarks. Is the interrelation or connectedness of foreign policy and economics, and I think both sides, the EU and Turkey, are currently striving for what is called strategic autonomy in terms of kind of being not dependent on too many actors, but more, Turkey being a more regional actor, and also the EU. And I mean, this was Macron's, or has been Macron's call for several years now, and now after the Russia's war of aggression, even more. So both sides are looking for strategic autonomy. And my call would be, they should actually, in doing so, they should still find and identify those points where they are important partners for one another. And because I think in the short term, it's really more the question of stopping both sides to drive further apart. Because, this is also each commission report is actually starting with the sentence, Turkey is moving further away from the European Union. This, of course, links to the technical assessment of the different accession negotiating chapters. But I think this is something we have, to stop the divide and bring them at least a bit closer together. So this is the short-term measure. And in doing that, and this is at the beginning, can only be transactional. Here, I really agree with Attila. But then in the medium term and longer term, we really need to look into how to frame the relationship in a more sustainable manner. And I always call it, Turkey has to find its place in variable geometries of Europe, where it is a reliable partner for the European Union. And we haven't really discussed that yet, but it not only depends on what the interests of the European Union are, but Turkey also would need to redefine how it sees its relations to the European Union and where it wants to position itself. And I think this is going to be the debate in the upcoming months and maybe years, and then we will see where it takes us. But EU-Turkey relationship, and let me end on that, is highly important for both sides. And it's also interesting to research them because at least it never gets boring. And so it's something that I'm going to continue for the future too.
So Dr. Funda Tekin and Dr. Atila Eralp, thank you so much for enlightening us in this topic of Turkey and the EU. We wrapped up our episode of Nasıl Bir Dünya, Nasıl Bir Türkiye. So I would like to thank both of you, and thanks to our partner Istanbul Policy Center, Stiftung Mercator Initiative of Sabancı University once again. So thank you for watching us, and see you on the next episode.